All right. One of these benchmark abduction abductee experiencer cases that have kind of set the groundwork for everything else was a case investigated by Bud Hopkins, God rest his soul, years ago. So if you're new to this phenomenon, I hope you're making a reading list. There's some of these books you need to go back and read because it's sort of like you can't learn calculus unless you learn algebra. These are the algebra books, okay? So this was one of these, cornerstone publications by Bud Hopkins. It was on the New York Times bestseller list. It was entitled Intruders, The Incredible Visitations at Copley Woods. It was also made into a CBS miniseries in 1992 called Intruders, okay? The main subject of this book was a woman named Kathy Davis. This was a pseudonym. She did not want her identity known to the general public for quite a while because 20 years ago, believe it or not, that doesn't sound like that long, but there was a lot more ridicule and judgment that went with people who said, hey, I've seen aliens, okay? There was enough chuckling if you said you saw a UFO, okay? But literally, even 20 years ago, admitting that you'd had some kind of an encounter could be a career-limiting admission, okay? And to stave all of that off, she just kept her identity secret so that her family wouldn't be bothered as well. In 1992, she revealed her true identity and went public. She co-authored a book with her sister Kathy Mitchell entitled Abducted, The Story of the Intruders Continues. So now she is known, but she's kind of shy. She actually very rarely does public appearances. With that being said, though, she has been on the Discovery Channel's Investigation X, History Channel's UFO Hunters, the Sci-Fi Channel, Unsolved Mysteries, Sightings, Maury Povich, Danny Bonaducci. That's it. Stop your career right there. You're on Danny Bonaducci's. Oprah Winfrey AM Chicago and the Denny Petty Show in Canada, as well as several appearances where she played the Native American flute in my backyard at a cosmic bonfire. See? Okay. She's been a guest speaker at numerous universities, think tanks, and conferences around the world, as well as guest appearances on numerous radio broadcasts and podcasts. She co-hosts her own podcast called Midwest Paratalk with Greg Kauble. And together with Greg, they co-founded a paranormal research team known as the Paranormal Underground in Indiana, which is where she's from. Now, as often happens with these folks, you heard Linda talking about it, you heard Grant talking about it, that these strange phenomenon are all kind of the same thing. They're different versions of it. They all kind of meld together and are being made out of the same fabric. So what happens a lot of times to abductees and experiencers, contactees, is paranormal phenomenon start to happen around them. They see ghosts. They have better psychic ability. There's all kinds of these strange things happen. It's as if they become like a conduit, some kind of a translator between these worlds and a focuser of these energies, if you will. So this was a very natural progression for our next speaker to get involved in paranormal research, and she's going to share some very, very cool stuff with you that they've discovered in their way. So please join me in welcoming Debbie Kauble.
Thank you for getting up early on a Saturday morning and coming and listening to me speak, especially if you were at the Crescent having pizza last night. That place is really cool, by the way. Okay, let me turn on my timer. First, I want to thank everybody here with this conference for inviting me. This place has a special meaning for me. This was one of the first places I ever came and spoke publicly. And my whole family came from Indiana to support me when I was here. And some of them are gone now, so it means a lot to me. It means a lot to me to be here for the 30th anniversary. I think this is one of the best conferences ever. And I'm just so happy to be here, and I'm grateful, and I thank you. And I'm nervous. I'll get better, I promise. As I go on, I'll be better. Like he said, I don't do this very much. but this was a special one, so. I'm probably going to be a little more open this time than I have been in the past. A lot of things in me have been changing in the last few years, maybe the last 5-6 years, and I'm feeling a sense of urgency to say what I've got going on in here. From the time I was born and when I was a little kid growing up, there's not really been anything normal about me or my family, but I never realized that the whole time I was growing up. I just assumed that it was normal because everybody else, in my family was like that. I used to have weird dreams when I was a little kid of leaving my body and flying down the street to where my big sister was spending the night with her friend because I was so attached to her. I didn't want her to not be there, and so I'd go and watch her in this girl's bedroom, but I'd get scared because I'd be up at the corner of my bedroom and I'd be afraid I couldn't get back. I spent my whole life, as long as I can remember, missing somebody, or something, someplace, and didn't understand it, felt lonely, didn't even really feel like I was part of my own family most of the time. But I look just like my sister and my mom, so clearly I am. That I also thought all these feelings were normal until I got into school and started to meet other kids and started to talk and quickly realized it really wasn't that normal. So I learned quickly how to keep my mouth shut. Even my birth is weird in a little bit of a way because my mom had my sister, and then she tried to have kids for 11 years, and nothing happened. So she went to the doctor, and the doctor told her that she just wasn't going to have any more. So they accepted that, and then they moved. They moved to the neighborhood where most of the neighbors decided that they liked to climb up on their roofs and watch the lights in the sky that flew around the neighborhood. So a few months after they moved in there, I got conceived and was born. And then 13 months later, my brother was born. And then 13 months later, my little sister was born. So clearly, something happened. I don't know, I'm not sure what it was, but I'm glad to be here. Race Hobbs loves this about me. I always say, I didn't go out looking for this. I mean, really, who wants to be famous for seeing a UFO? Not me. I didn't ask for this to happen. I didn't ask for my life to be this way. But it was. So basically now at my age, I'm beginning to think that I was born into it, and maybe even because of it. Because my mother had experiences before me, even when she was a little kid. Let's see. Sorry, I made notes this time. You guys don't know how lucky you are. It might be annoying, but I go all over the place. This is going to keep me a little more organized. I would say y'all that have seats by the exits might have the best seat in the house. But I do have notes now, so maybe it'll be all right. My youngest memories are like being shoved into the attic by my mom, because later her telling us that she was afraid that somebody was coming to get us. I remember this. My older sister remembers this. This was before Bobby and Sherry came. My older sister's phobia about attics is so bad that every house that her and her husband ever moved into, she made him nail the attic door shut on the house and wouldn't go around them. I remember it, but I was a lot younger, so I don't have the trauma to it she does. I just remember it. And I think it was because my mom was so upset, and I didn't understand why, because I was really little. Around 6 or 7, I went on a weekend trip with my older sister to Michigan to see some friends. It was her friend, but I played with her friend's niece. And I became missing for the entire day, really missing. They had to call the police to look for me. But I just remembered being in a house with a strange little boy, and my sister came and retrieved me. And I remember her acting strange, and she never talked the whole time. She just took my hand. When I became a teenager, I had strange things happen. I went on a camping trip one time with a friend, and while we were there, her and I were playing on the CB radio, and these boys started talking to us. And we thought that was cool, but we were at a campground in Rough River State Park in Kentucky, and we didn't want them, to come where we were because her dad would kill us. But when we were talking to him, we didn't tell him where we were, and all of a sudden we heard the boy say, "Well, we see you," over the radio, and we turned around and here come headlights over the ridge. And I'm like, "Oh my God, your dad is going to kill us." She went inside. The car pulled up, and 3 boys got out. One was a blonde, my height, this was, the 70s. His hair was down here, curly. Later, my friend's family and my friend told me that they said I looked like the boy and that we looked like we could be brother and sister. I just thought he was cute, and I was mesmerized. The 2 boys with him were tall, thin, and they had dark complexions, dark eyes, and dark hair. They looked like twins, and they never spoke. The blonde guy did all the talking. That was just a whole strange night where we sat around the fire, and this boy asked us all about our life and what we did. And they said they were camping. He said they were camping the next ridge over. And then when they left the next day, we went to go find them, and there was nothing there. There wasn't even any sign that anybody had been there. So that was weird. That's the kind of weird stuff that happened to me all through my life and as a teenager. And then when I first got married, I was young, and within a few months of me being married, I had a dream that these 2 guys came in my bedroom. I remember being awakened, and I couldn't move, but I could see them standing near the foot of the bed. They were, maybe 4 feet tall, and I just remember the big black eyes. And I remember when they moved, they just kind of glided. They didn't really walk. And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, don't touch me." I mean, the terror was so intense. All I could think of is, "Don't come any closer to me, and maybe I can hold it together." And I'm like, "What do you want?" My husband's laying in bed right next to me, and he's not moving. He's not awake. And I cannot remember the exact conversation, but I remember they had a black box in their hand, and it was a black cube. And it was roughly the size of a shoebox, but higher. And there was a red light or a circle, and you could look down and you saw a red light in it. But you couldn't see the light through the sides, just out the top. And I asked, "What is this? And can I have it?" And they said, "No, you can't have it. You'll know what it is and what it's for when you see it again." I said, "Okay." And like I said, I don't remember the rest of the conversation, but I remember they slid backwards away from me to the center of the room. They started to look like I was looking at them through the heat of a bonfire, and they got sparkly, and they got really skinny, and then they disappeared. Well, I fell asleep, and when I woke up, I remembered most of it. I told my husband, I shook him and got him awake, and he just said, "What did you eat for dinner that night?" And he said, "I heard nothing, I saw nothing." I'm like, "Well, I don't know, it must have been a dream." So I always just assumed that it was some crazy dream, because I come from crazy people, so it just marked it off, I guess a lot of people probably maybe don't know the story of Intruders because, well, a lot of people here might, but if you're fairly new to the UFO community, I was living with my parents in Indianapolis, in the suburb part of it, in 1983. I just moved back home with my 2 kids, single mom, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And the day was June the 30th, 1983, and that's burned into my mind and my psyche and will be there forever. And it's like when you saw the Challenger explode or when you heard JFK was shot. It's that kind of day, and it did that kind of thing to me. I mean, I always remember this. I was getting ready to go sew for a neighbor behind us. She was a seamstress who had a sewing business, and I was trying to make a little extra money to help my parents. And I couldn't sew, but I cut out her patterns for her. So I went to her. I was going to go to her house and cut out some patterns. I was standing at the kitchen window washing my hands. So after eating supper, I even remember what I was eating, KFC. I even remember what we ate. I can't remember what I had for dinner 2 days ago, but I remember what I ate that night. As I was standing at the window washing my hands and I looked out, I saw an unusual light in my parents' swimming pool pump house. And I knew that was wrong because I had been out there earlier because I helped with the maintenance of the pool. And I also, something about the light was wrong. It wasn't a normal shade of light, like it wasn't incandescent. It was different. It had more blue to it, and it was lighter, brighter, whiter. And it struck me odd. I kind of stopped a minute. And I mentioned to Mom that there's a light in the pump house. She says, "Oh, your father will get it." I said, "Okay." I said, I feel kind of weird, and I asked her, "Do you know, I don't have to go tonight." And she's like, "No, go ahead, I'm fine." So I left, and the way the house is made, it's a tri-level. In the driveway, when you come down the drive, you can either go this way in front of the garage, or you can go this way and go down the side of the house. And there's a big turnaround in the back because Dad has a workshop back there. And then between the workshop and the turnaround is the pool and then the back of the house. So I thought, I'll go down and make a quick loop before I leave, just to make sure. So I did. And when I did, which was only maybe 5 minutes later, that light was gone. And I thought, well, that's weird. And the pool pump house door was closed, and the door to the pedestrian garage was now open, which I knew that was closed. We'd been keeping our dog in there because she was in heat, and we didn't want puppies. So I thought a minute, and then I went ahead and went on to Deanna's because it was just one street behind us. And as soon as I got there, I called my mom, and I told her what I saw, and I said, "You want me to come home?" And she said, "No, don't worry about it." My mom was unflappable. She never got scared. She never got, she was like the undrama queen. She never complained, and the opposite of me. But so she, she's like, "Don't worry about it. Your father will be home. He's second shifter at Ford. He's an electrician. So he'll be home shortly, and he'll be home later. We'll be fine. I'll lock the doors. Don't worry." Okay. I hung the phone up, and it rang right away, and I just picked it up instinctively. I answer my friend's phone all the time, and it was my mom, and she said, "I want you to come home right now." First she said, "Debbie," and I said, "Yeah." She said, "I want you to come home right now." I'm like, "What's the matter?" Because she definitely sounded freaked out, and I'd never heard my mom like that. And my friend's husband heard my voice, and he knew something wasn't right, and he said, "Tell your mom to call the sheriff. That's what they get paid for." And she heard him, and she said, "No, I don't want anybody here but you." I said, "Okay." So I hung up the phone. I'm like, "I got to go home. I don't know what's going on." She said, "Well, let me know. And give me a call. Let me know what's going on." I said, "Okay." I went home. It took like a minute. I came back down that side drive where I could go to the turnaround, but I stopped. And I got out. There was a little patio room that Daddy had built. We called it the Florida room because it had a bunch of windows. And Mom was standing in it, and I walked in. There was a trash compactor there. And next to it was a shotgun that Dad stuck there. Now, it was not loaded, and I knew it wasn't loaded. Mom knew it wasn't loaded. She said, "That's not loaded." And I said, "Well, I know, but they don't. Whoever's out there don't know. I can get close enough to them, I can hit them with it, you know." So, and you know what? I'm not a brave person, really. Or I am now. I'm not too scared of much of anything. But then, at 24, 23, I was scared of my own shadow. There was no way I would go out there if I knew there were burglars out there, because that's what I thought, prowlers. I wasn't thinking about UFOs or aliens or anything other than prowlers. So, but I went out there, I walked around, I went to the pump house, I saw nothing amiss. I started to walk back towards the workshop, and I remembered that the door was open, so Penny had to be out here somewhere, so I started calling for her. And I found her under Dad's ladder truck, but she would not come out. She was whining, and I'm like, "Come on, Penny." She was my dog, so the fact she wouldn't come to me kind of weirded me a little. And I went back across the yard, still didn't see anything, and I went into the garage that was attached to the house. And while I looked like Elmer Fudd stalking that wascally rabbit, walking in this garage, there was nothing in there, and there were a box spring and mattress leaned up against the wall. And I thought, well, whoever's in here has got to be behind that mattress. There's no other place that I can look. I could see him. So I stick the gun around, and I'm poking in there, and I got a gun. I'm going to shoot you. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was on fire. I stepped back, and I stopped, and I'm like, what? All my skin felt like it was burning, and I felt like I was on fire. I was all like kind of breathless because it was so intense and so hit me so quickly. And I thought to myself, oh, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here right now. And I headed towards the pedestrian door. And when I got to the pedestrian door, I got hit right here. It started right here with something that was so intense. I mean, I thought I was dead. My first thought was, oh, God, I'm dead. It was bright. The light was so bright. I know my eyes were closed, but I couldn't get away from it. Every molecule of my body was vibrating. I could feel myself as each individual atom vibrating. And I couldn't move. And this intense electricity spread from my center, my chest and arms, down my legs. I couldn't move. And it felt like time stopped. Because in retrospect, to remember how I felt when that happened, there's no way on earth I could have withstood that for more than a second. But it seemed like time stopped. And I'm not sure how long I stood there like that. The intensity quickly dropped off. The vibrating slowly stopped. The light faded, but I couldn't move. And I couldn't see very well. It was like I got, flash bulbs in the eyes. And I had all these spots in my vision now, and I couldn't see details. I could see movement and big things, and it was dark outside in front of me, sort of. It was dark out by that time. There were house lights in the back, but there was a ball of light about 20 or so feet in front of me, because at this point now I'm out on the patio in front of the doorway, which I don't remember how I got there, even now, 30 years later. But this ball of light, maybe 20 or 30 feet in front of me, it was about the size of a basketball. It was very soft light, but again, kind of a weird bluish white, real clean white. I called it clean white. And it moved down really slow and to the ground, and then right back up to about my height. And I got the distinct impression it was looking at me. That time I saw movement off to my left, and I could see what looked like about 6 children in the yard and different points around this large backyard. And I saw them moving, and they kind of glided into a line, and then they started to glide down towards me, but off to my left. And that's when I looked over and I saw this other thing. In retrospect, I can't call it a ship because it was small. It was egg-shaped. Maybe 10 feet tall, maybe 8 or 10 feet at the diameter, but kind of went down smaller. And honestly, I don't even think it was touching the ground, but I can't say for sure because it kind of bobbled a little weirdly every now and then to give me the impression that it wasn't quite solid. These things moved into it. Well, even as small as they were, there's no way 6 bodies can fly, 50 billion miles in this little thing. They'd be like all over each other. I didn't, we called it a UFO because we didn't know what it was. Now, I believe it was some kind of a portable bridge or a portal or something. It was something and it was portable, a piece of technology that could be moved from place to place and used to travel to some other place. But not like getting into a ship and flying away. It's different. The next morning, after this whole incident, I was standing out there, and I could hear a voice, a disembodied voice, that I could not figure out whether it was a man or a woman. It was so generic. And it said that it was unfortunate, that my pain was, I can't remember the exact words, it was unintentional. And then I felt some kind of a pull to my shoulder and a burn in my ear that felt like, if you would visualize a red hot knitting needle being shoved in your head. And again, I can't move, I can't scream, I can barely see. I don't see anybody behind me. I don't know where I'm at. And then the next thing I remember, I'm standing out on the patio, the wooden or the concrete patio, and I hear my name. And as soon as I hear my name, it was like I started to wake up. And I turned and I started to walk towards, there's a lower patio, steps, and then the upper porch where the kitchen was, and then the patio, and then the Florida room onto that. I got up to the upper porch where my mom was, and with each step, everything that just happened poured out of my head. And my mom said to me, Are you okay? Is everything? Are you okay? And I said, yeah, it's cool. But I didn't want to go back and sew anymore. I wanted to get wet. I felt weird and gross and funky, and I wanted to get wet. So I told her, I'm going to go see if Deanne wants to come over and swim. Like, all right. A week later, my mom is dishwashing, doing dishes, and she turns around to me and she goes, you know what? You remember when I called you to come home that night? And I go, yeah. She goes, I just now remembered why I called you. And I said, why? And she said, I was standing at the window and I saw this ball of light like a basketball size over by the bird feeder. And I'm like, well, I wish you would have told me that. Maybe I might not have come home. I don't know. I probably would have. She forgot all about even seeing this light. And she said something about this basketball-sized ball of light that enveloped the bird feeder in front of her window. And she said, I looked for headlight beams, which made no sense, but that's the first thing she thought of. And she goes, there wasn't any cars coming around the bend or anything. She goes, and it just kind of got really small. And then it disappeared, and that's when I thought I need to call you. I said, okay. Anyway, the next morning when I woke up, my eyes were swelled up, completely shut, and hurt so bad. When we were in the swimming pool later that night, I never got my head under the water, but I'd say about 10 minutes after we were in there, all the lights started to get like white halos around them. Like when you're a kid and you stick your head in the chlorine and open your eyes. But I hadn't gotten my head wet. And my girlfriend and her daughter both felt nauseous, and so did I. Walking to the pool, as we walked across that open yard, Her daughter, we thought, stepped on bees or something because she started complaining that her feet tingled and was burning and felt numb. But it would have had to been a bunch of bees because it was both feet. But we looked her over and we didn't see anything, so we got into the pool. Well, the swimming episode, we ended up giving up probably about 20 minutes or so into it because we just all felt crappy. And then, like I said, next morning I woke up, my eyes were swelled shut, and I felt even crappier. So my mom took me to the emergency room. And in the emergency room, they're like, we don't have the equipment to really take a look at what's going on. It so happened that there was an eye doctor in the hospital for something, and they called him down to the emergency room. He looked at me and he said, I have an office across the street, and I would can you bring her across the street to my office? I have better equipment there to be able to see what's going on. So she took me across the street. And the first thing he said after he looked at my eyes, and I could hardly open them, I was crying and screaming. He said, have you looked into the arc of a welder's torch? And I'm like, no. So he basically said he thought I had like really severe conjunctivitis, is what he called it, and creams and drops. And 2 weeks later, they finally healed up, but my vision was never right after that. I was diagnosed with macular degeneration, dry, in my 30s, and cataracts in my 30s, and I just recently had both my lenses completely removed and replaced. These are just blank shots with readers. My vision's 20/20 now, except I need something to help me read. But the doctors thought that was pretty young to be diagnosed with those things that are usually related to age. And I blame that light. I can't prove it. Nobody's ever going to be able to prove it, but I'm just saying. The funny thing is my other sister who had the UFO experience in 1965, where she took my mom to the bingo game, dropped her off, and then saw this UFO in the church parking lot, drove up underneath of it, and then the next thing she remembered, it's dark and it's also now time to go pick mom up from the bingo game. She has wet macular degeneration and she's blind in one eye. So we're the only two that have had this kind of UFO experience stuff. So I feel like that's suspect, but there's not a whole lot you can do about that. Thank God my eyes are okay now. So anyway, we didn't see this mark in the yard until a few days later. I don't know whether it took that long for it to bloom or we just never went back there because, I don't know, we didn't go back till the 4th of July weekend when the whole family came to swim. And my nephew came running in the house and he said, Grandma, look at that mess in your yard. And so we all went outside, and first thing my mom says was, oh, that must be where the UFO landed. And I looked at her like, what? And then I looked at this mark, and it was like I went into some kind of altered state, and I started to see things, and I started to remember bits and pieces of that night and the things that I just told you. And I started to see those two big black eyes that I had seen in 1978. And I knew in my gut, this was the same people. This is the mark, about 6 weeks after. It was you can't tell now, but it's a perfect circle, 8 feet in diameter. That swath was 49 feet long, perfectly the same width, and ended in a perfect circle on the end. That two little pieces on the edge where dirt was pushed up a little bit, there were cracks in it, and I tried to measure how deep I could go. I had a 12-inch ruler, and I dropped it on accident, and it disappeared. I never found it. So it was at least 12 inches deep, the crack. The soil under this felt like a rock. I took pieces of it later and put them in a cup and put water in it all night long to see what would happen. Next day, they looked exactly the same. They were like a rock. And the plant life there was just all laid down and dead. The snow melted off of this stuff for the first 2 winters. every time we got snow, it would start to melt off of this area. And we couldn't figure out why that happened. When Bud started his investigation, he had some soil samples that he took to some laboratory, and they had to cook the soil for, 12 hours at some ridiculously high temperature to get all the moisture out of it, but it still wasn't quite exactly like this, the control soil, and that the samples that he took of this did not have any life in it at all. No bugs or I don't even think any bacteria or anything. It was like dead. That information is all in his book, Intruders. And there's that swath that ran the length of the swimming pool. That's the pool right back here. That's about a year later. It started to heal like a wound from the outside in. And the grass that came in around it was thicker and almost a darker purplyish green color, The one thing, Mom had tomato plants growing by the swimming pool, which was a good bit away from this mark. But that year, the tomato plants, the vines got as big as our arms, and the plants were huge. The tomatoes were huge, but they were so acidic that no one could eat them. They would just make your lips peel. And there was a swath of trees. There's a row of trees along the other side of the yard where this mark was. There was a 6 or 8 foot width swath of these trees where all the leaves withered and turned yellow and then fell off. Just that year. And that's 2 years. You see how dark the grass is. It slowly came back. And it was thick. It was thicker. That's my drawing I did for Bud of the things I saw in my room in 78 when I was a young married woman and had dreams about. I will always say dreams because I don't know what else to say. In my mind. Bud showed me a drawing one time of a woman in South Carolina or North Carolina that had drawn a picture that looked so much like this. I actually thought it was my drawing when he showed it to me. And you got to remember this was over 25 years ago, and you didn't see this stuff on TV or everywhere like this. So there was no way that woman could have seen any of my drawings unless she was in my head or experiencing the same thing or seeing the same thing I was seeing. I had to that point been saying, well, maybe I've just got an active imagination. Maybe I'm dreaming this and it's just, it's not real. It can't be real. And then when I saw that, I kind of screwed that up and literally had a physical reaction that I just wanted to throw up because it made it even more real than I wanted it to be, for sure. Even when I went to talk, I had psychological testing later that year for Bud. I took written and verbal psychological testing. First thing I said to the psychiatrist, it's okay if you can, it's all right if you tell me I'm crazy, because they make pills for that. And then I can take a pill and this will go away, and I'm okay with that. I was a mess that whole year. I was a mess. I swear I think I had a nervous breakdown. I sat up every night between my 2 babies, my 2 boys. They were in twin beds, and I sat in a chair between their bed every night, waiting and watching and protecting them. And then I couldn't sleep until the sun came up and Mom was up and everybody got up again, and then I would sleep. Thank God for my parents, because I don't know what would happen to me and my kids if my mom and dad hadn't stepped in and helped me. That whole year was a crazy year. I wrote to Bud Hopkins. I found his book, Missing Time, in the library, and I had tried to read it 3 or 4 times, and it kept having such severe panic attacks that I ended up in the emergency room a couple times. And when you go to the emergency room and the doctors in there know you by your first name, you got an issue. And my mom said, you need to take that book back to the library because we can't afford you to be reading this book. I said, so I did. But I went back and got it because I knew there was a page in the back that had an address where you could write to this guy. And I was desperate for help. And I was losing it. So I wrote this letter, and I sent him pictures of the yard, and I sent him some drawings. But what I did was I threw my sister under the bus, and I made the whole letter about her UFO experience in 1965. And then at the very end, I said, oh, by the way, this happened a few weeks ago. And I gave the letter to my mom, and I said, would you please mail this for me? And she's like, okay. And later she told Bud, I almost threw that letter away like 6 times. She goes, and I kept thinking, do we want to go here? She didn't know what to think about it. She was worried about me. And she said, I was walking past the mailbox one day, and all of a sudden something said, put that letter in the mail. So she dropped it in. Well, I didn't hear from him for a long, long time, weeks and weeks and weeks, maybe months, a couple months. And I just forgot about him. And I was falling apart and having nightmares, And I had gone out one night with some friends, and I came back in, and my mom, first she says, oh, guess what? That coffee table right there, which takes 2 people to lift. She said, I fell asleep on the couch, and when I woke up, it was over there. It moved all the way across the room by itself. I'm like, okay. You could see the dent in the carpeting where it had been. And I go, Mom, you didn't move that. She goes, I was asleep. I didn't move nothing. She goes, I don't know how it got over there. And she said, oh, by the way, that guy called tonight. I said, what guy? And she said, the one you wrote that letter to. And I went, you're kidding me. She's like, nope, here's his phone number. I looked at it for the longest time and decided the next day to call him back. And that started a 3-year investigation. I sold my washer and dryer that was in storage to get enough money to buy a bus ticket to go to New York. And halfway there, I was thinking to myself, what in the hell are you doing? First of all, I never traveled anywhere in my life. I had this phobia about getting lost. Imagine that. And going to New York City, I'm from Indianapolis. That's the big scary city, and there's axe murderers and all kinds of stuff there. That's all I knew. And I'm going here to see a guy I don't know about UFOs. And I thought, what is wrong with you? And then I thought, well, if he cuts your throat, you deserve it, because you're just stupid. I'm having this conversation with myself all the way to New York, and I'm so anxious. When I get there and I see him, and he reaches out and he takes my hand, and I know this was the right thing to do. And here we go. 3 years into this, he's come to my house several times. He interviewed my neighbors, my employer, my friends, my family, rest of my family. He went around knocking on doors, making phone calls, having me driving him around. When I went to New York, he took me to see a psychiatrist named Dr. Aphrodite Clamar, who regressed me in a very generic way, just to allow me to understand what regression really is, and that it really is just a super enhanced state of relaxation that will allow you to remember things if your mind is ready for you to. And I guess some people had donated some testing at, I think it was Columbia Hospital. It was a big hospital in New York City. It was either doctors or somebody donated money, so I was taken there, and I was given EEG to see if I had epilepsy. I was given a CAT scan on my brain, and they did an injection, which I signed up for. And they did 6 hours of psychological testing, written and verbal, and that's when I told the guy, it's okay if I'm nuts. And then later on at home, I had a voice stress test. Bud found, I think the guy was a retired police officer who came out and did it, and I passed it. He told Bud, well, she certainly believes that this happened to her. That's all I can say, because he was a little freaked out. But I had all this testing done, and they couldn't find no brain tumors, no epilepsy, no psychosis. I wasn't schizophrenic or delusional or any of that stuff. But I did have post-traumatic stress disorder. I had anxiety and panic issues, and those silly things said I was intelligent. That's the only thing that came out of this testing. And like Bud said, you got to have something traumatic to happen to you to have symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And I had a pretty normal life. Well, I thought it was normal anyway, nothing extraordinarily traumatic. So another finger that pointed to this phenomenon. During that year, and a little bit after, I was consumed with some weirdness. I would be sitting I'd be in bed asleep, or I'd be driving down the street, and I would be suddenly bombarded with these phrases and words that I had to write down in order for them to make them stop bugging me so I could live. So I'd wake up in the middle of the night with these images in my mind, and I'd draw them. Or I'd have a word or a phrase. Most of it made not much sense to me, but I'd write it down, and then it would leave me alone, and I could go back to sleep. Or I could continue driving. I would have to pull over because I couldn't even focus on driving because it was so intense. But after it was done and I'd pull over, I'd be okay. I collected seeds and stones of all different kinds. I had this magnificent rock collection and all kinds of seeds for all kinds of plants in my room. And my mom was very annoyed with me about it and always telling me to get rid of it. And I said, I will, one day I will. And one morning I woke up and they were all gone, and my mom swears up and down she did not touch them. I don't know where they were. I was also having a lot of psychic things happen. A ring became missing of mine, and I knew it was in the house, and I followed the feeling to my son's bedroom. In the middle of their bedroom, under the carpeting and under the padding, when I took a screwdriver and pried the carpeting up and pulled the padding up, had to move the bed to do this to get to the middle of the room, there was my ring. And my mom stood and watched the whole thing. And she's like, what? She came in and she goes, what are you doing? Because I was tearing the carpeting up, and I'm like, the ring is under here. She said, how do you know that? There's no way. And I'm like, yes, it is. I'm telling you, I was frantic. And I pulled the carpet up, and there it was. My mom stood right there and watched. I wouldn't believe that for anything. If anybody told me they did that, I'd be like, okay. But I did. I don't understand how or why. Stuff like that happened to me all the time during this time. It's like something in me was opened for some reason. Back to the drawings. These are some drawings that I did. I did these drawings in the late 80s, and then crop circles started to come more into the press in the early 2000s, and a lot of the stuff kind of reminded me of my drawings, and some of them spoke to me. This one I called Transformation. That one. And I was excited when I saw that on TV. This one I called Casey's Bubbles. Well, I'll come back to that in a minute, but I think now I understand what that is. And I'll come back to that in a second. This I always thought was a symbol for me, like a name, me or us, I don't know. But I thought it was me. I don't know what that means. I saw it on a wall. The wall was black and shiny, and all the print was in white. It was like in reverse. Same thing with this. This was alive, I thought. It was moving, and it was in 3D, and I don't know what it was. But at first when I saw it, it was like I was standing in front of a big TV screen on a wall or something, and it was moving. That's why I thought it was alive. I'd never seen anything like that before. So there's that. This is like a compilation of a bunch of things. This is music, sound, right here. these just are symbols that indicate something. The whole bigger thing, I don't even know what that was. This stuff is some kind of a way to count, like a date or a time, but I don't know what it means. A lot of this stuff wasn't in Intruders. Bud didn't want to publish this stuff and make it public because he wanted to hold it back for future reference in new cases for control. He didn't want it to be out in the public so that other people would see it. And, you know, it's easy, it's human, to see things and then it gets in there and then later it comes back up and you think it was yours and really wasn't. I mean, whenever the investigation started with our family, the one thing he insisted on was don't read any books or watch anything on TV about UFOs. Stay away. We want this to be as clean as we can keep it. So I'm like, no problem. I can't afford another hospital bill. This old woman is from June of '82, and I'm going to tell you, like I told you, I can't remember what the heck I had for dinner 2 days ago. So these next couple little things I want to share with you that has to do with her, I'm just going to use my book. I am a tornado magnet. Don't ask me why. Twice I've lost everything I own in tornadoes. The first time was in '92. I had moved back home with my mom and dad after I left my husband. And I still had everything we owned, me and the kids, in the van parked in Dad's driveway. The only thing that we'd brought in the house was what we had on and some of the kids' toys. Later that evening, and I hadn't even gotten the van unpacked yet, a tornado came through southeast side of Indianapolis in the suburbs, pretty good-sized city. It was only an F1, but it was big enough that it dropped a tree on Mom's garage, dropped a tree on Dad's workshop, and it took a 65-foot beech tree, twisted it into a spear, took it straight up in the air, and dropped it right on my van, which impaled my van right through the engine, ripped open the top of the van, exposed everything in it to the torrential rain, and ruined everything I owned. Well, we were okay. We were in the basement. So we were out power for, 5 or 6 days because everybody got messed up pretty bad. A lot of people got messed up worse than we did. Old man had a generator in the garage. They are loud, and they have to be fed with gasoline around the clock if you want to save your food in your freezer and your refrigerator, so that's what he did. I was laying in bed, and I was hearing the generator roll, and then I heard it stop. I'm like, well, we're out of gas. All the lights went out, and it was dark. And I heard the old man get up and head towards the garage to fill the gas tank. All of a sudden, there started to be, and I'm thinking I'm awake at the time, so I still don't know whether this is a dream or not. But I start to see a glow around my bed, this soft glow, and as it got bigger and bigger, I could see people. There were like 8 different people standing around my bed, and they were like human. They weren't scary looking. There was women and men and children, and they all had these faces of just, concern and care. And this old woman who was closest to me leaned over in my ear and whispered, "Don't you remember us?" And I laid there just as still as I could because I was a little freaked out. I looked over at her through the corner of my eye and I said, "No, I don't." And she said, "Well, we don't actually look like this, but we know you've been through a lot recently. You've done very well through all of it, and we only chose to appear to you in this manner for your benefit. Look at me and you'll remember." And I was like, nope, not doing it. I had my eyes closed so hard, I can't believe I even got them open. And she said, "Look at me," softly but sternly. And I said, "No." And I said, "Buzz off." She kept telling me over and over, "Please look at me." And I'm like, "No." And then she finally said, "Very well. We know you're tired. We will leave you now, but we will be back. Be patient. Things will improve." Then there was a boom. and I was alone. I mean, it was an audible, and they were gone. And as fast as it all happened, they were gone. And I felt really strange, but I fell asleep immediately. So that's why I don't know whether I was already asleep or not. But when I woke up, I was laying in the exact same position that I was in when I fell asleep. And I was almost kind of sure I'd been awake during that whole thing. I have two kinds of dreams, and I always have. I have the kind of dream where you wake up and you think, I might have had a dream. And by the time you finish your coffee, I didn't dream. I have those kind, and then I have these other kind, and I call them my VR dreams. They're in color, they're in 3D, and the longer I'm awake, the more of it I remember, and I never forget them. That was one of those, I guess. If that was a dream, that was a VR dream. But then on the 29th of June, I had another one of these VR dreams. This one was very comforting. I was standing in front of a small pond, and the water level was very low, but rising. I could see water pouring out of a large machine on the other side of the pond. It's like pouring out like a waterfall. And it started to ripple out in front of me, come toward me. And before I knew what was going on, I looked up and there were two men that were rising up out of the water. And they were dry. Hairs were dry and everything. One of the men was a tall blonde, very well built and very attractive, very nice looking guy, human. And he walked across the surface of the water to me, on the surface of the water. He explained to me that they were returning the water that they had taken, and that I should come with him. I said, okay. So he put some things on my feet that looked like rubber socks. And then I could walk on the water with him. And I walked over to the machine, and the other man followed behind. He never spoke to me. And inside this machine, and I don't remember what it looked like, he took me to a room with soft light. Really, it was illuminated, but I couldn't find the source of it. It was just like all around. And he sat me down, and he told me that I shared his heritage, that my mother had been there before me, and that she had been to that very place where he took me before me. And I don't remember everything else we talked about. I never have. But when he took me back to where he'd first seen me, and before he left, he said to me, he will be back to check on me again someday, and please don't forget me this time. And I woke up as soon as the dream was over. But when I woke up, I felt really peaceful and calm and loved and like a renewed sense of knowing, but don't ask me what. This is the kind of weird stuff that I have had going on, and there's more, a lot more. One of the problems I always encounter when I do talks is that 60 or 90 minutes just ain't going to get it. I got to pick and choose stuff based on what I feel in my gut I need to say, wherever it is I'm speaking, because there's just so much. I mean, we're talking about 58 years of this life, and every moment of it's been different in some way. I mean, so it's hard for me, and sometimes that's why you guys are lucky I kind of kept some notes so I could keep a little more, stuff orderly, so I don't confuse you even more. I told you I had a tornado in 92. Well, back in 90, what did I do with that thing? Oh. Back in November 17, 2013, the new home we just purchased was hit by, we were at the top of the F2. It was 160 miles an hour, and F3 is 165 miles an hour. So almost an F3 tornado took my house out. That's actually my neighbor's house. That's my house. That room right there that says, "Oh, always kiss me goodnight," that's where we were laying on the floor. the ceiling caved in on me before I could get out the door. My husband got out the door, but then the ceiling caved in and blocked the doorway, which opened in, as you can see, so I couldn't get out. So I had to wait for the fire department to come and get me and the dogs out, but I wasn't hurt. Just shook up. Couldn't close my eyes for about 3 days because every time I did, I heard that sound. And then for a few weeks after that, I had a lot of trouble sleeping. And then hello, OPSD, whatever again. So I had to go back to the doctor. This is a picture of the tornado that went through my neighborhood that was taken by some people that lived about 5 miles or 3 or 4 miles from us. It was pretty good size. And that was the path it took through my town. And then we got hit again this last August 24th, we got hit by a bigger F3, and it missed me this time by 1 street. But some of my coworkers lost it all again. My husband and I have already decided if it happens again, we're gone. Just give me the insurance money, I'm out. 2 weeks after the tornado, we had 17 inches of snow. It was one of the worst winters Indiana's had in years. And it didn't melt till March. So we had nowhere to live for 10 months. So we lived in hotels, and we ate junk food and got crappy, and it was awful. It was the worst year of my life. As it turns out, we ended up on an episode of Twisted Believers on the Weather Channel, and I didn't even know about it. Imagine that, okay? There was a dude that lived in Noblesville, which is just south of Kokomo, who was filming UFOs over Kokomo as the tornadoes were hitting. And I didn't even know anything about it. And Dave, my husband's like, well, maybe that's why we didn't get killed. I'm like, well, nobody got killed, so, we're lucky. I didn't know how, I couldn't link to it, but that's the URL that you can go to YouTube and actually watch the episode if you want to see it. Or you could just go to UFO, or go to YouTube and Google, or search Kokomo UFO, and it'll come up. Okay, now I'm going to get into the paranormal stuff here. I've got just about enough time to do it, and then, like I said, I have to pick and choose, but it is what it is. This little guy, everybody in the paranormal community makes fun of me for this orb picture because most of the people I used to hang around would say, oh, orbs are just dust and water and bugs and whatever. And I'm like, well, yeah, sometimes they are. That's true. But not all of them. I don't think all of them. And I felt a compulsion to take a picture somewhere one time. It just said to me, snap a picture. So I did. And this little fuzzy ball was on it. And I'm like, oh, it's just an orb. And then I got to looking and I'm like, wait a minute. Like I blew it up. Can you see, or is it just me, or do you see that little fella right there with the weird little eyes? I almost felt like, have you seen those like funny weird mirrors in the store for security and you see somebody looking up? I almost felt like that little dude was like looking up at something, like maybe trying to see me. I don't know. That's the way my mind works now. I captured an EVP like 30 years ago when I was playing around with it with my nephew. EVP is an electronic voice phenomenon. It was of an old man who said, are the spirits listening? And then right behind his voice, another one said quickly, a younger voice said, can I listen too? And as soon as I heard this, I thought, where are the spirits? There's somebody somewhere else, I don't know where, trying to hear me with a recorder somewhere or try to take my picture. Maybe we're the spirits. Anyway, I love this thing. Maybe it's not that impressive to some people, but for some reason I really love this little picture and I wanted to share it with you. Okay, now we're going to go to the EVPs because I started, like Forrest said, I started to get involved in paranormal research because I felt a connection to it somehow. So far, the only connection that I've found is the only common denominator is the experiencer themselves. So I'm beginning to feel like it all comes from within us. We create this somehow. But they call me the antenna. My little paranormal group that I worked with, and then I started my own, they called me the antenna because I got EVPs everywhere I went. And they weren't those kind of things you hear on ghost adventures. These were words that you could understand. I throw that stuff away, but I don't judge. I'm just saying. But I know it's real. I'm so passionate about this. My husband died in 94. He committed suicide. It was traumatic, and it put me through a lot. I watched it, by the way. But you know what? It was a gift. I was strong, and I became stronger. I was spiritual, and I became more spiritual. And he gave me so many gifts after he was gone that proved to me without a shadow of a doubt that we don't die. We do not die. We can do whatever we want or go wherever we want. And he stayed with me for the longest time. And he still comes around. And it wasn't just me experiencing it. So you can't blame it on my grief or my willing him or wishing him to be there. Other people saw it too. Heck, a woman all the way from Florida called me the day after he died, and I hadn't even had a chance to tell her he'd passed away. And she said, I had a dream about Ko last night, and he told me to tell you that he loves you more than anything in the world. And I said, really? And she said, yeah, he was in my patio room playing with my dogs. And when we used to go visit her, he loved her dogs. And he would play with them all the time. And I said, well, Vicki, he passed away last night. She dropped the phone. And, So, I mean, this reached all the way to Florida, these gifts that I was given. And I know part of what I'm supposed to do in my life now is to tell you this is real and we don't die and you need to learn this and feel it. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to feel it, because it will change how you live your life and every decision you make will change. I had a near-death experience when I gave birth to my first son. And it wasn't like, I seen a white light and I went to an all. It wasn't like that. But it was very similar to an experience I had when a man that I met on a bus, 17 hours I spent with him on a bus, came to me in a dream and told me to take his hands, and he wanted to take me somewhere really cool. And I took his hands, and everything went black. And I couldn't see my body. I couldn't see him. I knew I existed. But that was all. And I couldn't breathe, but I didn't need to. But it freaked me out, and I told him, Pear, I'm flat. I feel too flat. Something's wrong. And I could still feel his hands in mine, but his voice sounded like he was half a mile down the road, so far away. And he said, excuse my language, he said, oh shit, I can't take you. You're not ready. And I woke up. Later, I found out he had died in 1985. So actually, when I was having this dream, he was dead. I didn't even know it. My near-death experience was similar to that. My heart had stopped twice on the delivery table. I had eclampsia. I went into organ failure, and I went into coma. They took my baby 6 weeks early, which, by the way, we both went home 7 days later together. So there's a miracle. During the surgery to have the C-section, I heard them talking about sailboats. And then all of a sudden, it got quiet. And then I felt this whoomp and this audible whomp sound that jarred my whole body. And I felt suddenly as if I had disconnected from this body, and I was in this black box. Everything was black. I couldn't see, I could feel these walls, but I couldn't see them. And I started to pound on them, and I tried to yell, I'm not dead. Let me out. I'm not dead. And then I heard a voice in my ear, and I'm not saying it was God or anybody else. I personally think it was a nurse in the operating room that whispered in my ear, your baby's here and he needs his mom, don't leave. And I heard her say that 3 times. And on the 3rd time, I'm like, I've waited all my life for this baby. I'm not leaving now. Whomp. I reconnected, and when I did, the sound started to come back, louder and louder, and the commotion was crazy, and I could feel my body being flipped around, moved off the table, then thrown back up on the table quickly. And I heard the commotion, and then I went out. And then when I woke up, I was in the recovery room. And my doctor was telling my mom and my husband it was pretty dicey there for a minute. We thought we lost her, but she came back. I came back because I wanted to. You know, when that lady told me my baby was here, I'm like, wait a minute. I waited 18 years for this baby, 19 years, and all I ever wanted to be was a mom. I ain't leaving now. Forget that. I don't care how bad it hurts. Because when I disconnected, the pain was gone. Because I felt them cut me open. They didn't give me enough anesthetic to not feel this. And when they cut you in surgery, it's not slice. No. It's pinch, pull, tear, pinch, tear, pinch, tear, pinch, tear. And I felt every inch of it. But I couldn't move. And I think it was because they were trying to be as careful as they could with the drugs because I was in such a mess and bad shape for me and the baby. So I don't blame them for that, but it was definitely traumatic. It was bad enough that when I found out I was pregnant again, I had to go to a psychiatrist. And not because of the baby, but because of the pregnancy. Seriously. So anyway, but the near-death experience and that experience with Per years later were very similar to me. And I felt like the same being at both of those times. And both of those times, I apparently wasn't in my body. And then when my mom died, we had talked about death before she died. She told me if she could possibly give me some kind of a sign afterwards to let me know that what we talked about was real, she would, and she did. I drove home that night. I sat with her and held her hand as she took her last breath. And I whispered in her ear, "Don't forget to let me know." And then I went and took Daddy home. Family was together for a while, and then I had to make that long drive back to Kokomo. It was an hour and a half. Hour and 20 minutes by myself. I got home, I was absolutely exhausted because Mom passed away at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I knew she was going to leave the night before, so I had driven down there and slept with her all night because I knew it was close. I just did. She died of lung cancer. They diagnosed her, told her she had 6 months, 3 to 6 months, and she lived 2.5 really good years. So anyway, I got home, I'm wore out. My husband is there, he's like, "Come on, let's go to bed." We're in bed asleep. I don't know, it's probably 2 or 3 in the morning. We hear this loud crash. Thump, boom, 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 boom. And we jump out of the bed, the dog starts barking, and I run to the top of the stairs, and my wall in my house has pictures all the way down the wall and all the way on the upper landing of family. My mother's picture jumped off the wall, and literally, I gotta say it jumped off because the nail was still there. And the little crappy, cheap dollar store cardboard thing you hang on the nail wasn't torn, wasn't broke, wasn't messed up at all. So that picture came up off the wall, rolled down those stairs to wake me up, and was sitting straight up at the bottom of the stairs. There's my mom's face, okay? I'm like, "Oh my God, Dave, Mom, it's my mom. My mom did it. She did it. She said she would do it." And all the grief that I had just went right out the door. And I was so excited that I was shaking. And I was just like jacked. My husband was up. I went downstairs and I sat at the foot of the stairs on the couch. And on the edge of the stairs, I had 3 angels sitting on, like stair sitters, you know what I mean, on there. The middle angel, out of nowhere, shoots off to the stairs and rolls over the floor and stops at my feet. And I said, "I got it, Mom." Got it. My dog was, my little dog, Cookie, was a little freaked out, and she jumped and started barking and ran into the kitchen. Dave's like, "What happened?" Because he heard it, made a little bit of noise. And I didn't touch it, I left it there, and he goes, "Check that out." And I go, "Yeah." I said, "She really did it." My mom was a special person and unique. When she played school with us when we were little kids, we had flashcards like everybody else. But my mom didn't do flashcards like my kindergarten teacher did. She'd lay them out on the table face down, and she'd go, "Now show me where the ball is." We did it. She would say, "Just close your eyes and you'll see it. You'll see it. Just close your eyes. Put your hand over that. It'll feel different." I thought everybody played with flashcards like that. I didn't know. I found out quickly enough in school. And like I said, that's when I learned how to keep my mouth shut. But So my mom was a different kind of girl. And she was adopted. You know, she was adopted from the orphanage in Kentucky. And so her real family actually found her right before she passed away. And that was good. But, you know, sometimes people, when they're adopted, they have a problem like connecting with you sometimes. They can't help it because they got ripped away from their own family. And they might not be little and think they don't remember, but they do. My mom named her first daughter Kathleen Barbara because she liked the name Barbara, and then she found out that was the name she was given when she was born. So you remember these things. Anyway, I got involved in paranormal stuff. I wanted to be able to continue to talk to my mom because I knew she was there now. My late husband, and a whole bunch of friends and some family that have passed over. You know, the older you get, the more dead people you know. I tell the young people at work, I know more people dead than alive at this point. So that was probably one reason why I wanted to get involved in paranormal, but I also wanted to get proof, to prove to you that we don't die. And that they know this. They know this. Anyway, the EVP antenna, I wanted to share with you a few EVPs that I caught. This is my favorite one. It's called Hi Ginger. We're in a house in Indiana, family home. We had our station set out in the garage. Nobody was in the house except the dog, whose name was Ginger. This family didn't even have a young girl in the family. This voice you'll hear is clearly a child. And they talked about seeing a little child run up and down their hallway. That's one of the reasons they called us. So let me see if I can get this dude to play. We had my recorder on the coffee table. It was my recorder that picked it up. We had a camera. We had a camera in the corner of the room, which also would have had a mic. That camera's video did not have this on it. The only recording that picked it up was my recorder. And like I said, the dog's name was Ginger, and in the video, you see Ginger walk past the recorder. And as soon as she walked past the recorder, this little kid says, "Hi, Ginger." Now that is a pretty good EVP. You know? And that's one of my favorite ones. And I'm like, I get so excited because look, this is real. This is not, maybe that stuff on TV is some Hollywood-ish up, but this is real. Let's see. Now these might be a little bit harder to hear because there's a little more background noise, different venue. We were doing a family and in Beech Grove, and they had moved out of the house. It was an old family home that had been in the family for years. Many of their family members had died in there. They wanted to see if anybody was upset with them for selling the house because they had built a new one. So we were out there. We picked up a lot of stuff. This was interesting. And the family members ID'd the voice as a family member. They recognized the voice. Somebody asked him, are you in this room, Uncle Charlie, or something? And that's what we think it said. Well, I'm right here in this room. You'll see. Can't really hear it as good over the loudspeakers. When you have it in the microphone, you can hear an old man. He goes, "Well, I'm right here in this room. I mean, right here in this chair." See if I can play it again. Yeah. Yep. There was no old people. No, there was no one that fit that voice in that place. This is another voice from the same home, and it was of a woman. And we asked him, "Did your great aunt have a Dr. Hubert?" And she said, "Well, hell, she had so many doctors, I don't know all their names." She could have. So we never really were able to quite figure that out. We try to chase that down when we can. If you hear it. Again, the family ID'd this voice as one they recognized from one of their family members. Now this is interesting. We were at the Crump Theater in Columbus, Indiana. It's a beautiful old theater. It had a segregated section at that time. This was way back in the 30s. And so we were down in the basement where the dressing rooms were, but we were on the segregated side of the dressing room. And one of our team members had a football jersey on with the number 16.
We got the number 16.
He says, "Woo, we got the number 16," or something like that. We heard the number 16 very clearly.
We got the number 16.
You can't imagine the feeling that we get when we review the audio and we hear this. It's like I jump up and down and start running around going, "Dave, listen to this, listen," you know. And I'm so grateful that my teammates had this on their DVDs, because if they hadn't, and I wouldn't have been able to get some of these back from them, they would have been lost in the tornado. So thank God. And some that were on my hard drive, my husband, even though my computer was wrecked, my brilliant husband was able to retrieve some of my files from my hard drive and save them. So thank God for that too. This was a home in Kokomo. The woman's grandmother had passed away 2 weeks prior, and she ID'd this voice as her grandmother. Now this EVP was done a little differently. We used what they called a shack hack, like a little transistor radio that I cut a couple wires on to make it continually scan through the channels on the FM or the AM side. And the theory was that it would grab some audio bits and pieces of the electronics and try to form a word with it. And I mean, we experimented with it. I wasn't that thrilled about it, but we tried it. And because this woman's name is so unique, and that's not something that you would hear on an AM radio station very often, I thought we should keep it. And you hear her, she says, "Astrid." And when we played it back for Astrid, she said, "That's Grandma." So, I mean, those things help too. I think, yes, that is all. When I started getting involved with paranormal activity and I started doing this EVP stuff, it was all at a time in my life where I was really beginning to put the dots together on my whole experience, the whys and the what's going on, how come. I'll go back to this one slide I said I'd get back to. I called this Casey's Bubbles. And I thought, oh, that kind of looks like that, the same idea. But I wasn't really getting it yet. I mean, this was 20 years ago. But I'm beginning to understand that these things were how they were trying to talk to me. They were trying to teach me with pictures, because words didn't work. We don't speak the same language, but we see the same things. I believe, now I'm not a scientist, I actually suck at math, so that's not ever going to happen. And I don't understand theoretical physics or any of that, but I believe that this was their way of showing me what universes look like. And it's not necessarily that number, but it was just like a slice. The idea was I saw soap bubbles in my mind. And where a soap bubble touches another soap bubble, it kind of becomes one right there in that little window, that little bridge. before one of them pops. And I believe that it's in those areas where you can access the next layer. I believe there are multiple universes, maybe as many realities as there are people to visualize them, each one in their own little world. And I say that because I've come to the realization that it's not just me, but every single one of us is a powerful being. A powerful being. You're capable, your only limit to what you can do is what you believe. You're only limited by what you believe you can or cannot do. That's the only thing that holds you back from your full potential. And I think that we have the ability. I told you I'm going to swerve out of my lane a little bit here. I feel like, I got to tell somebody this because it's time. We've been walking around for 20 years going, oh, something big is coming, something's happening. Okay, it's time. And I got to start talking about this. We can create our own reality just by thinking about it, just by visualizing it. But you got to believe that you can. If you don't believe, it ain't going to work. And I learned this the hard way. And don't laugh at me, and I know it sounds crazy, but let me say, I realized I was in control of my own reality and that I could manifest whatever I needed. Now, you notice I didn't say wanted, I said needed. Yeah, because I'd like to win the lottery and, not have to worry about money, but that's not what I need. I know my thoughts are powerful and that I have to be much more careful, and I think it would help everybody to be more careful about what I allow into my mind and what I project out into the energy. Because if I allow myself to continually flood the energy with negative thoughts, I'm going to create negative circumstances. And the more of us that do that, the more powerful it will be, and we can actually make this a really crappy place. And the only way we're going to be able to fight it, because it's not really all that great right now, is to change that thought and like bombard it, like thought bombs of positive. Okay, we'll have our own Moabs. But you got to be real specific when you ask for things, because this energy does not know the difference between buying something on the internet and just whipping it out a tornado to wreck everything. I mean, I said, unless you're very specific about the delivery method when you ask for a new roof, a new AC unit, and a new furnace, the energy will just open up the shortest path to the desired destination, and sometimes that path might not always be the most pleasant, but it will get the job done. I feel like human beings, some of us are like tube-type radios, or maybe transistor radios, in a Dolby Digital surround sound, real audio world. Like we're a bunch of radios in a room full of television waves. I mean, there's some things out there we just don't have the equipment to even comprehend. And it's going to be there, and we're not ever going to know about it. That can change. I think there are children being born right now with a little better wiring than we have, and they're going to teach us some stuff, and they're going to pull us through to the next layer eventually. I also believe that there are, I guess, people, for lack of another term, in those other layers that know we're here, and they're working on stuff, technology, our word, some kind of equipment, to get to us, to communicate with us, to let us know they're there, to let us know they're there, to let, you know what I mean? I know this is crazy. I know it sounds crazy. Like I said, I'm trying to swerve, but I got to tell you, this is where it's going. This is where it's going for me, and I know I'm not alone. My moniker on my Twitter feed is, I'm here to change the world and I'm not alone. So, yeah, you probably all here with me, right? I'm beginning to just understand. I wrote down a lot of stuff back in the 80s, and I gave it to Bud during those periods of time when I was going a little crazy, and Bud was very uncomfortable with them. So basically, they just stayed there for the longest time. But now I'm beginning to understand when they said things like light can be used to travel and heal and feed, that time is a vehicle that can be used to go from point A to point B or wherever. I understand that stuff a whole lot more now. Like I said, I'm no scientist, but it's starting to kind of make sense. I think that some of us were maybe born a little different. I'm pretty sure I ain't wired quite like most people I know. And that might not always been a good thing, but it is what it is, and I'm pretty sure that this is why. And I think the new ones coming are wired even better than me. So I want to work as much as I can to help open the path for them, because they're going to save everybody. But anyway, and I'll tell you, this is how my husband just laughs at me. I have one of those speaking alarm clocks at home that you can program to say whatever you want, and mine says, "Your presence is required in this timeline. Please get up." And when I first did that, he's like, "What is wrong with you?" He says, "Well, I get it. So, I believe that my experiences have been a combination of things. Maybe some extraterrestrial stuff, a lot of interdimensional stuff, maybe some people that used to be alive, maybe some people that have never been alive, at least not here. And maybe some people that are alive here right now, but really not what you think they are. So, anyway, just always remember that the power's in you to do whatever you put your mind to. And I really appreciate you spending time with me today, for allowing me to kind of be myself a little more than I used to be, for being patient with me while I stumble through things that sometimes there just really aren't any words here to actually sufficiently convey to you the entire idea. I wish I could just climb right into each of your heads and just be there, and then that would be so much easier, but that's not how it works. So thank you for being with me today. Thank you for letting me help you on your journey, and I hope you have a really great rest of the conference.